Okay. Have a good one. Have a good one.
I'm recording.
Yeah, it should be good. It's recording.
It is recording?
Yeah, don't stop it. It's recording. Yeah.
Okay, so they're on now, are they?
Yeah, you can see some people can turn on their screens. That would be nice. And ask people if they can hear you clearly.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Silence. This is your professor speaking.
Hey.
Yeah.
How are you?
Fine. How are you?
Great, great. Just
Cold day. Cold. It's a cold day. We're in the middle of it.
Yep.
But I don't know, just surviving, right? Or is everybody flourishing? This incredible universe we're living in.
You can also see in the chat if you happen to know about that before.
Yes. Yeah, sure. Oh, I should say, yes.
Professor, can I ask a question?
What's that?
Can I ask a question?
Where are you asking me?
Yeah, I just have a question.
Oh, sure. What is the question?
You uploaded notes on UMlearn, and your handwriting is a little unclear for me to understand. And
I realize that. I'll discuss that. Yes, those are my notes from. Well, they're the notes that I used to give the lectures when we were not online. And so I just decided to put those notes, which are obviously written in my scrawl, online, perhaps help you. But I think the main thing is, I'll repeat this, is the recording. I'm going to record everything. And there's also closed caption. But I'll explain everything. I'll explain things fully. And I'll give you a lot of support. You can expect a lot of support.
Thank you.
Because I think it's obvious that everybody needs a lot of support, especially in these circumstances. Hello there.
Hello, how are
Hello.
you?
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I guess it's 1:30, so we can start. And I'm glad to see some of you have are showing your face and on the screen. It's nice to see the real human beings. The more, the better, as far as I'm concerned. Um, well, this and I should start out by saying we're obviously putting on these courses under highly unusual circumstances, and I'm going to try and give you as much support as I can, as you'll see. And one of the things I'm doing is I'm recording all of the lectures, including this one. And you should remind me, somebody should send a chat message or something, because sometimes I forget and I don't record, and it's important to record because you'll have a full record of all of the lectures as a result of the recording, and you can just go back, flip back, and if you haven't gotten something, you can go back to the lecture and um, find out for yourself. And as you'll see, the recording will also contain answers to what are called the review questions in the syllabus. And these review questions are the basis of the examinations. So I'll be reviewing the answers to the examination questions right through the lectures. So the recording gives you access to these review questions. And I don't give you every detail of an answer, but I give you a kind of perspective, which allows you to answer the examination questions. So it's worth attending the lectures, and the the recordings are useful in terms of preparing for examinations. If you have questions, of course, you should intervene. And the way to intervene is basically, we have about 70 people in this class, but we can develop a kind of decorum and turn taking. And people can ask questions, and we can have some sort of a dialogue, and somebody else can join in. If you take turns, we can actually converse under these circumstances. It's worked for me before. There's no reason it shouldn't work in this class as well. And if there's something out of order, I'm not doing something right, of course, you have to tell me. How else will I know? Especially intervene when it comes to my conveying, the lecture. Are there any questions at this point that you have that you'd like to put? Okay. So in the morning, I sent you this message asking you to download the syllabus. And I'm sure you understand that there's learn, and you go to this course, History 135, and under content, you'll find the syllabus. As well as I've already remarked, the scrawled lectures that lecture notes I used to use when I delivered these lectures in person. They're there as well. If you can make them out, they're an additional resource for you. Now, let's start simply. Of course, my name is Henry Heller. I've been the professor here for quite a long time. I went to the University of Michigan as an undergraduate, and then I graduated with a PhD from Cornell University down in the States. The system up here is much the same as it is in the States. I wrote a book called The Capitalist University. It was published in 2018. And I think it's a pretty good book because it discusses the reality of what universities really are all about. And it's a very good introduction to not, there's of course stuff on history, but I discuss all of the social science and humanities disciplines and their main features against the institutional context of the universities in North America. It's a history of the universities, and I think you'd find it quite interesting for your overall studies, because it's important to understand that, obviously it's important to do as well as you can in these courses, but it's also important to understand what you're learning, who is creating this knowledge, and how it fits into the general picture and the general social and political context in which this knowledge exists. So that's available in this book, Capitalist University. Some people thought it was a good book. In any case, I used to have an office in University College on the campus, but of course that's all gone by the wayside. My cell phone number is given 583-5497. And as I say, you can call me on the cell phone to chat, to talk. I say on Wednesday between 10:30 and noon, but you can also, by appointment, if you send me an email, we can have a telephone conversation just about any time. If you have a problem or you want to discuss something, you can call me. And of course, I give my email. This is the most reliable way of actually getting in touch in the first instance, because I'm on email very frequently, and you'll get a pretty fast response. So those are by way of introducing myself. Are there any questions about what I've said? Okay. Now, what I want to do now for the rest of the hour, I am going to go over the syllabus because it's important that all the elements of the course be understood by you. But I don't want to begin this first lecture by laboriously going through the syllabus. It's quite boring. I want to more or less introduce you, locate the course. Why are we studying Western civilization and so on? This is what I want to do in the first lecture, and it gives you an overall sense of where this material might fit into your general understanding of the past, and also history in relationship to other disciplines. So to begin with, the first line, the first subtitle in the syllabus is course description. Reading from the course description, I say, this course narrates the early history of Western civilization down to 1500. It begins with prehistory. That is to say, the period prior to civilization. It continues with the development of the civilizations of the Middle East, Egypt and Mesopotamia. Of course, you're aware that simultaneously or slightly later than the invention of Western civilization or the coming into being of what we call Western civilization, civilization developed in Latin America. It developed in China. It developed in India in a kind of amazing way, almost simultaneously in these in different societies. What we call civilization appeared. In any case, the civilization out of which Western civilization eventually developed was born in the Middle East, in Egypt and Iraq, or as it was called back then, Mesopotamia, the land between the two rivers. You know all about Iraq. The West invaded and occupied Iraq recently. I guess they're fond of their origins, so they invaded Iraq. But we have then the first civilizations, the ones that we're most interested in, were born in the Middle East, Egypt and Mesopotamia. And out of these civilizations, there came the ancient Greek civilization, then the Roman civilization, Roman Empire. Within that, there developed in one part of the Roman Empire, namely Palestine, this religion known as Judaism, out of which was spawned the beginning of Christianity. And then as the Roman Empire in the West withered away, we have the so-called Middle Ages. Finally, all of this ends with the Renaissance, the decline of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, which was really the beginning of modern times. We date the beginning of modern times, I think appropriately around 1500. So the course covers this very long stretch of history. It's the second part of this course, 136, continues the story from 1500 until the present. This is the introductory course, one of the introductory courses in the history in the history department. Now, having said all this, it's a real mouthful. I want to first of all say, I want to talk first of all, what is civilization and what is the West? Start with that. Okay, a civilization. How do we define a civilization? Well, I'm giving you a rudimentary definition. A civilization, the word civilization comes from the Roman word for city, for town. So a civilization is characterized by towns. Lots of people are able to live in towns. So a civilization contains towns in the first instance. And the reason that people can live in towns is that there is the reality of agriculture, and agriculture produces food surpluses which enable people to live in without directly producing their own food. So cities and towns and agriculture are fundamental to the existence of civilization, whether it's in India or China or the Middle East or later on in Europe. So there's agriculture and there's the towns that live off the surpluses produced by agriculture. And as a matter of fact, produced by the great mass of the population who are peasants. Now, a third characteristic is the existence of a class system. Social inequality is a third characteristic. All the civilizations which we know about are marked by social inequality or the existence of classes in society. So a civilization consists of cities, agriculture, and a class system. And I would say one further characteristic is the existence of the state, a state structure. Those are four basic characteristics. There are others, but those are four basic characteristics of civilization. Now, the question is, now we're talking about Western civilization. So can anybody tell me what are some of the states that make up Western civilization? Which are the principal states of what we describe as Western civilization? Does anybody have a sense of which states make up Western civilization? Anybody? What are the states? I'm trying to sort of locate this. Oh, there we go. On the chat, Ryan has responded. He says England, France, Germany, Spain. Those are some of the states. Does anybody have any addition? Oh, Ryan asked me, do I have a favorite era of history professor? Oh, that's such a great question. I'm glad you asked. Well, I've written quite a bit about the French Revolution. I'm very interested in the early history of capitalism. I've written a book about contemporary history. I'm very up on contemporary history and politics. Very interested in that. But I'm crazy about the ancient world as well. I like Rome and Greece as well. And as a matter of fact, I'm writing a book with a friend of mine, Peter Kolczynski, in the Data Studies Department about the various great periods of history. I won't go into the details of it, but so I'm interested in everything. Where I have published is mainly in the French Revolution and the beginnings of the early history of capitalism are the things that I've published. And I've published about 10 or 11 books on these subjects. But I also have published a book on contemporary history as well. But to get back in terms of, somebody says Western civilization would include American Canada. And somebody mentions Mesoamerica. That's right. Central America and Latin America. I saw recently online that, for example, in Peru, they found a city that dates back to 2700 BC. 2700 BC marks the beginning of Chinese civilization. So in Peru, there was already a kind of civilized life, which eventually evolved, of course, into the Inca Empire way back 2700 BC. I think you have a sense of it. Which is the dominant state in so-called Western civilization? Which is the dominant state? Yes. Avery responds, the US is currently, so Ryan says currently the US. Yes, that's right. The United States, when did the United States become the dominant country in Western civilization? As somebody says, not for long. World War II, that's right. The United States emerged as the dominant country. It already began after World War I, but it was the emergence of American dominance came in this, yes, Ryan is teaching history. He notes that before that, it was England or Britain, which was the dominant country. That's right. Yeah, you know quite a lot. So, and this chat function is quite fun. It can be quite fun. Let me ask you a question. Like I've given you a little background on myself. Why are you in this course anyway? Why did you enroll in this course? And jokes and comic, joking commentary is welcome. You can say anything you want, really, and it's okay. Tell me, it would be interesting for me to know why you're in this course. And of course, it doesn't matter what your answer is. A line or two is really what I'm looking for. In any case, now I want to talk about some of, and these are, some of them are idealists or ideal characterizations, but often you'll get politicians, statesmen, writers extolling the virtues of Western civilization. So can you tell me what are considered to be some of the essential characteristics of Western civilization? Like what is considered, do you have any sort of sense of what are the values, the achievements of Western civilization? What would you say? Anybody have any idea what these might be considered? Public institutions. Somebody remarked that they took an art history course. Well, we can say the art and architecture of so-called Western civilization, starting with the Egyptians and the Babylonians. It's fantastic. Going through Rome and Greece and through the Middle Ages. Some of you have been to Europe. Some of you want to study the history of art. Studying Western civilization is foundational to sort of understanding the contextualizing the art, the architecture, or even sort of understanding the literature of Western civilization. This kind of a course that I'm offering is a gateway into the study of these things, the history of music and so on. It's all related, but in terms of the values of Western civilization, and some of these are ideals, if you like, but certainly. A lot of people, somebody noted democracy. When we say democracy, I think we're referring to representative democracy, the kind of democracy we have, and which is shared by most of the states of included in Western Europe, in Western civilization. Representative democracy would certainly be greatly valued. Is there anything else that is notable that, there would be a lot of discussion of human rights and the rights of the individual. Individualism would be a second characteristic which we're told goes back to the ancient Greeks, is important. Likewise, going back to the ancient Greeks are reason and science. Braden notes consumerism. Bilieu speaks about capitalism. Yes, capitalism and consumerism certainly were invented in Western civilization. Economic growth, because Sarah notes being able to survive without hitting the limits of the biological old regime. In other words, economic growth is a basic characteristic of Western civilization. That's true. Let's see. Based on some of these things, certainly a continuous economic growth is the idea of progress. That, I mean, no other civilization broke through to the idea that human existence could be one of continuous upward progress. Carl notes, I guess somewhat skeptically, oligarchy. Yes, that needs to be discussed because, as I said, social class is a basic characteristic of civilization, and that's no less true, contrary to what other people might say, of Western civilization. In fact, Western societies are notoriously unequal, and none more so than the United States or Canada. There's incredible social inequality in these countries. And so oligarchy is certainly brought forward, but oligarchy would also be evident in other countries as well. So does anybody have any? So these are some of the achievements of Western civilization. However, and you've already, some of you have, should we discuss this? Does anybody have any questions or want to say something more than it has appeared on the chat line? Okay. Some people are saying that Western civilization, despite the fact that one of its virtues is the idea of progress, has hit a wall. That Western civilization is in trouble. Western civilization is in crisis. What do they mean? What are they referring to? Is it true? I'd like to chat about this a little bit with you if we can. Is it true that this Western civilization has hit a wall or a blip? When people refer to the crisis of Western civilization, what are they referring to?
Would things like global warming and climate change count?
Yes, of course. The ecological crisis. If Western civilization was based on continuous growth, what do we do faced with the fact that this growth may be counterproductive, may be leading to destructive climate change? Somebody mentioned the rise of China, or more skeptically, Ryan says the re-rise of China, because China has risen and fallen numerous times throughout its dynastic history. But clearly, China, which of course declined from the end of the 18th century onwards, is now like a phoenix, is rising. And some people, I personally am not alarmed at all, but some people are frightened, especially politicians, and they tell us we must resist China at all costs. Yeah, the rise of China, the ecological crisis. Somebody notes the century of shame, that is to say, the humiliation of China, because China was fantastic. You can't imagine Chinese civilization. Incredible. You know, the stuff that went on in China all through the centuries, and which we're in the West only now learning about. Incredible stuff. Well worth your time. In any case, so there's the ecological crisis, there's the rise of China, but there's also, one could note that a lot of people are skeptical about the political institutions in the West. And of course, nowhere more so than in the United States. We see that there is a veritable political crisis in the main capitalist country. And what the future is going to be, clearly, Trump will fade out, presumably, or drop, but there'll be perhaps others. Half the population voted for Trump. There's a lot of discontent. And in Canada, I think the institutions are holding together pretty well. But in a place like France, which is one of the central countries, or in Britain, there's unbelievable skepticism about the political institutions people are living under. So there is a real crisis. We don't know how it's going to turn out. Maybe it's an open question. But clearly, somebody says, Zachary, many feel Western democratic governments have become corrupt and do not represent the people anymore. That's a common feeling that exists. I wouldn't say that's true in Canada, but I think that if you go to other countries, that's a common feeling of the population. And of course, this alienation breeds, well, we're seeing particularly a right-wing extremism that has developed. Okay. Now, I want now to, having discussed that, and that was quite good, especially for starters, and we, the chat function has proved to be quite interesting, and I'd like to have more chats with you as we go along, more interaction, as much as we can get. I'd like now to talk about where this, because we're trying to locate this course, where this course, Western Civilization, who invented it? How did it come into being? And it's important for you to do that with all your courses, to ask questions about, well, we're studying the history of fine arts. Where does that come from? Where did people how did people come to study economics as a formal subject? Where did a course on psychology come from? What is the history and the ideological context of all of these courses? It's important to ask these kinds of questions. In other words, to take a critical view of all of the courses that you're taking in university is, or sometimes it's referred to as a kind of self-reflexive view of psychology. Just as we try to understand our own personal psychology, we should take a self-reflexive view of knowledge and sort of try to understand how these knowledges came into being. Well, let's look at the history of this course. Okay. Western civilization. Well, to begin with, let's look at the situation in Canada half a century ago, or maybe 60 years ago. History was taught. There were history departments. History was being taught. And there was an introductory course in history, for example, at the University of Manitoba. But it was not Western civilization. It was, believe it or not, the first course that you took if you wanted to study history was English history. The first course you took in history at the University of Manitoba 60 years ago was a course in English history. Can somebody explain why that was? Why would that course be the required course at a university in Canada 60 years ago? Well, reason is clear. Somebody mentioned Pax Britannica, English dominance, especially English dominance over a country like Canada. England had an empire. Canada was part of it. Now, of course, 60 years ago, Canada was already a sovereign country, but nevertheless, the English influence was enormous 60 years ago. Um, um, Canadian culture, many people didn't think Canada had a culture, and English culture was considered to be certainly not by the Quebecois, but for the rest, the people thought, well, that the culture comes from England. Our culture comes from England. And the dominant groups in Canada were the English still. The English settlers were the dominant group. So English history was taught as the formative course in history 60 years ago in this country. There was no course in Western civilization, in other words. And the same thing is true of actually most of the states of so-called Western civilization, where you lived in France, you lived in England, you lived in Italy, you studied your national history. That was a foundational course in history. The invention of Western civilization, somebody says we still recognize the crown. England for so long, that's right. The English influence here in Canada was overwhelming. But around about the end of the First World War, in the United States at Columbia University, I'm sure you've heard of Columbia University. It's one of the top universities in the world. And there they invented this course, the history of Western civilization. Round about the end of the First World War, this was invented by Columbia. It became a very popular course. Well, why would this course be invented at a top university in the United States of America in 1918? Why did that happen? Well, give me your, Ryan responds, World War I. The United States was beginning to emerge as the dominant country in the world. It was spreading its wings. Up until this moment, it was a completely isolationist country, and advanced thinking in the United States. Now the United States was becoming the top dog. Everybody was indebted to the United States financially and dependent economically. And the leaders, especially the intellectual leaders in the United States, they had fought the war ostensibly in the name of liberal democracy. And so we're all liberal democracies and we should study our history together. So this was an intellectual initiative coming from what was now the new leading nation in the world. So here you see Columbia University invents this course, History of Western Civilization. Well, it caught on. More and more universities in the States began to teach it. But it was especially after World War II, when clearly the United States had become absolutely dominant in the world. All of the states of Western Europe were now dependent on the United States, not to speak of Latin America. And so this idea of the history of Western civilization made even more sense. And also the people at Harvard said, as the Cold War started, well, Western civilization is characterized by respect for the individual, representative democracy, the triumph of reason. We're not like the bad communists. We have these values. And the Cold War was fought ostensibly to defend these values of Western civilization. So the people at Harvard said, well, all students should have exposure to the history of Western civilization. You see, I'm giving you this sort of ideological background that must be borne in mind here. Now, finally, in the 1960s, by the 1960s, Canada had ceased being cultural dependent of Great Britain or England, and now culturally and economically had become a dependency of the United States. So it's, you see in the 1960s, in the universities in Canada, the universities accepting these courses in the history of Western civilization as the beginning course. So Western civilization, this idea of studying the history of Western civilization, it came from the United States. Now, this was, in some ways, I think, I do think that it has a certain intellectual validity. Not entirely, but it has a certain intellectual validity. But people raise the question, well, isn't this all rather ethnocentric? Isn't this especially from the 60s onwards, people began to say, why are you just teaching the history of Western civilization, for Christ's sake, to use an expression? Why aren't you talking about world history? Why the heck are we're an interdependent world. There are many other areas of the world that have civilizations. So why are we all stuck on Western civilization? And so people began to demand, well, we should have a course in world history. Sure enough, you did. Of course, this is coincident with the spread of what we call globalization from the 1970s, 1980s onwards. So we do begin to get additional courses in world history. And the two, therefore, in the history department, we do have courses, beginning courses now in world history and in Western civilization as well. Now, there are people, of course, who question the whole. First of all, they question the validity of Western civilization. They criticize Western civilization. They said basically it's an imperialist civilization that has dominated the rest of the world, and that it has oppressed people, especially in third world countries. And all of this criticism of Western civilization goes under the rubric Eurocentrism. Eurocentrism. It comes from the word ethnocentrism. You're just concerned about your own people and their dominance, and you're not concerned with the rest of the world. You are Eurocentric. Again, there's a certain truth to that. There is critique, but I, for one, would not give up on Western civilization altogether. Hey, there's a lot of art and architecture I'm interested in, and so on. I want to know about this. There are, I think that toothpaste and modern science are good things. I'm not about to abandon all this, so I want to study how all of this got started. On the other hand, there's a lot of force in the critique, and none has expressed it better than a certain character by the name of Ken Monkman. Ken Monkman, I don't know whether you know this. He's an artist, Kent Monkman. And Kent Monkman, I don't know whether I can bring this up. How I would get on this. I want to Google him. If I could Google Kent Monkman, if it's possible. I'll show him the next time, because I don't want to lose the thread here. In any case, this guy, Kent Monkman, his paintings are huge murals, and they basically present the history of Western civilization from the point of view of the indigenous people. And they are a critique. They satirize, they criticize, they put into question the whole enterprise of Western civilization. And the thing about what is so outstanding about Monkman from our point of view is that Monkman comes from the north end of Winnipeg. And this guy has become one of the most famous. He's an indigenous person. He studied at the U of W. He studied Western civilization and the history of art at the University of Winnipeg, and has now become this this world figure, this whose murals are this incredible critique. And in fact, recently, the Metropolitan Museum in New York, which is the most prestigious museum in the United States and one of the most prestigious museums in the world, are installing 2 murals by Monkman, this North End Winnipegger, in the main room of the Metropolitan, because his critique is so powerful and his art so interesting that his paintings are being installed at the Metropolitan Museum. So what I want to conclude with is to say to you that we are going to pursue the history of Western civilization, and we're going to both explore the positive side of Western civilization, but we're not going to hesitate to criticize the history of Western civilization. We need to look at both sides of the question, and this is the way I'm going to proceed. Now, is there anything further that do you have any questions or anything about the structure of the course or what I've said that you'd like to chat about? Oh, yes. Oh, look, somebody on chat, Sarah, notices he was given an exhibit at the WAG. Well, he's been given exhibits now all across Canada and down, as I say, in New York. They think his work is, of world importance, which I think it is. Okay, do we have to read any notes? Well, I've posted the notes, but they're in my handwriting, which is difficult. Not impossible, but difficult. And the notes do give a lecture by lecture breakdown of the lecture. But also, I would say that I'm going to carefully record each lecture, and you'll have a full, you just have to go back and forth in the recording, and you can find everything you need. And the lectures are important because I include in the lectures a discussion of the review questions, a thorough discussion of the review questions, which are the basis of the examination. So we have a term test and we have a final exam. They are based on these review questions. And so if you carefully note the recordings, and of course, what I say about these review questions in the course of the lectures, you'll be fully prepared for the examination. There's a term test and there's a final, both of which will be take-home examinations. I'll discuss this further as we discuss the syllabus, which we're going to devote most of the next class to. So this has been a good beginning, and we had is any of the information discussed? No. Any of the information discussed in the first introductory lecture testable? No, it's not testable, so you can just forget it. No, I'm just joking. Oh, here Ryan is sophisticating the lecture and so on. Yes, I would say, Ryan, to take the contrary view, a lot of people, some people, especially anthropologists, some of them say, well, why does Western civilization start with Mesopotamia or the ancient Greeks? Well, how are the ancient Greeks related to 16th century France? It seems a stretch. So there's that kind of a critique. I didn't want to get into it, but there it is. And you know, one can begin to and one should sort of conceptually not accept immediately. Oh yes, Egyptian civilization is immediately connected with what the habit of English tea drinking that's developed in the late 17th century. By no means. It's a long stretch. So, and can be intellectually questioned. Well, we'll continue with this in the next class. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.